Sego sewa guego, yugunagui selection gets, Akwesasne, the Knagale, Onkwehonwehneha A.I. Hi everyone, I'm MoniGarr. I'm an XR, producer and founder of MoniGarr.com, based in Akwesasne, Ontario, and Akwesasne, New York. Our reservation has the borders of Ontario, Quebec, Canada, and New York State, USA, over us. I self-identify as Onkwehonwe, while governments refer to me as Mohawk of Akwesasne and a St. Regis Indian. So as an XR producer and a multimedia artist, I work in augmented reality, virtual reality, 360 and 180 film production, spatial audio, AI, and IoT, Internet of Things. So I've worked over 30 years in the tech industries, usually as a lead software architect, a developer, and my career progressed from, I actually started out as a developer, and then I think they started calling me engineer, and then an architect, then a lead architect, and you know how that goes. And then even some of my last official jobs, as where I was an actual employee, I was the highest, was a director, a technical director for mobile software projects that were going on all over North America. And in those, it was usually iOS and Android that I did. And I've always been a consultant. I'm usually working remote. And if I'm not working remote, before COVID, I was being flown all over North America to meet with various clients. Usually I was brought into meetings with decision makers and executives to talk about, the solutions I would suggest, how I would do it and why, and even like budgeting and planning, the stuff that isn't really in the software engineering, not in the code anyway. So I did this for over 30 years. And in recent years, my career has been transitioning, which that's something I love about the type of work that I do, is it's constantly transitioning, because I've never been the kind of person that can sit and wait for things to happen. I'm not really good at factory line work. If I'm doing the same thing all the time, it would probably drive me crazy. With one exception, I do beadwork. It's Mohawk Woodlands raised beadwork. I do that. Sometimes it is repetitive, but that's different than, say, if I was in the tech industry, debugging mobile apps every day for the rest of my life. That's my idea of hell, to be honest. But if on the flip side of that, because I do that work too, is if I'm going into a mobile app project, say iOS and Android, and there's a huge problem, and I debug it, I prefer to document it, like how it happened, why, how we fix it, etc., and move on from that. Like, that's my idea of fun time. Because at the core of what I do is I love seeing people benefit from tech, especially when it's really complex issues. For example, Johnson Controls, there is IoT devices that blanket the planet, and one year they were overheating. The batteries were overheating, catching on fire, and the IoT devices were not gathering or sending any data that was expected. So I was brought in to debug the problem, correct it, document it, teach others like how I did my process. And that was so much fun, you guys. I love, those are the kind of projects I love, because no one, I think because too, I'm a little bit rebellious. There's a rebellious side of me. No one can tell me how to do my job. And nobody at that time, because there was really smart people on that team, but they just, for whatever reason, they weren't able to figure it out. So I went in there with my wild feral ways, and it reminds me of, like, finding parts for a res car and keep that running. That's how I approached this problem, because I knew it's an expensive problem, for one, but I knew it was going to be expensive to figure this problem out and correct it. So, like, I had a board, I put all kinds of devices on it, mobile devices, all different kinds. all different operating systems, everything. Had them on there, installed the software, and, had it where I could debug it, things like that. And I was watching everything. I caught a couple on fire. And what I was doing is I was blasting data back and forth from any device I could find, which, yeah, that's crazy. But anyways, that's what I was doing. And I figured out the problem within 4 weeks, actually. And long story short, actually, I'm going to describe it in this because this is something really interesting and valuable to know. The problem ended up being in the software that was built that the mobile devices were holding, and it would send the data back and forth. They had this one class where it was beautiful. It was written in a way that any university professor would be like, this is elegant, it's beautiful. But the problem ended up being it wasn't giving any rest, no rest or break to those devices, the batteries. So what I did is I thought about it and I was like, you know what, maybe if I were to add in, which is kind of ugly and messy looking, if I add in some extra loops and, well, first off, put it all in a background process because that was even going on. So whatever. If I add in some loops to give that battery a rest with the assumption that each loop is 1 second, and there's documentation you can look up, it'll tell you like what I just told you. So what I did is I put in these loops to give that battery a rest, even though we had to do a background process that's pretty intense. And it was a lot of different rests and a lot of different timings. So some of those, because the way I was, and I'm going like this because I can see the code in my mind. Anyways, so I timed out in a loop the break, give a rest to the battery, to the point where I caught a few on fire and I was like, oh, well, this isn't a long enough rest, where I got it to just the perfect time where all of the devices were so happy. And what was happening is I was giving the batteries a rest, but still keep that process running. And it ended up not only was nothing overheating anymore, but the data that was expected to be passed back and forth, it was all happening again. And no new equipment had to be purchased. Like the old equipment was fine with this. And that was so exciting to me, you guys. Like I don't know. I'll just say that was exciting. That's what I love about the kind of work that people like me do. And I tend to be really feral. It's very difficult for me to sit in an office or a cubicle. That's just not my thing. It is my idea of hell. So with that, it's like when you get to know yourself, your strengths, and how and where you thrive, it will help you be able to build really cool solutions that everyone can benefit from. Because that has been a challenge for me as gatekeepers and executives thinking about hiring me. Sometimes I get really scared to hire someone like me because I'm feral. Like I'm not the kind of person to sit in a cubicle and be puppeteered. It's just not, I'm not able to solve any problems that way. So I've been really lucky. I've had some pretty cool teams of people I get to work with. And I know that they put themselves in uncomfortable positions to hire me and work with me. And I really appreciate that. So here, this next slide is some of the tech that I'm using still today. Obviously, this tech has changed and evolved over the years since I got my first job in the 90s. And even, in the mid 70s when I was building Eliza Chatbots to tell never-ending stories. But right now, the bulk of my time is spent in, how every week changes, but I'll say in the recent months, yeah, I'm in Android Studio, Unreal. I still go on Unity 3D actually more than Unreal Engine because I have to, a lot of my old work is made with Unity. A new thing to me right now though is content creation for TikTok. I'm building some effects for that. I'm doing augmented reality effects for Instagram. So I use it's called Spark AR Studio. That's interesting. It's called visual programming. That's interesting to me because I didn't learn software engineering or programming in a visual way. I had to, even though I think about it in a visual way for sure, Spark AR and actually all of the new stuff coming out, like they have these visual programming way. That's really interesting to me and exciting because again, it's like future generations can build on top of what older people built for them. And I shouldn't even say older people, what the people before them built, because there's a lot of incredibly talented, fast, young people working in the tech industry. So my next slide, I'm just showing some more of the tech stack that I use, which is, I think that, did I mention it? So Steam VR, Steamworks. I have Onkwehonwe Vr is in there, and that's a VR environment that you can fly around and you fly into a flower and you will hear how that color is spoken in the language we speak here in Akwesasne, which is Onkwehonwehneha. And if you actually start using your own voice to repeat what you hear, there's this little thing in the corner of the garden. It will start changing to the color that you speak in Onkwehonweneha. And that is, for any of you that know about the technical challenges with low resource languages, we have no speech engines for Onkwehonweneha. These computers actually, none of them support Onkwehonweneha. So I figure out ways to use the speech engines that are already installed on whatever device and make that pronounce our language. Fun times. It's can get complex and crazy. The next slide. Why do I work in tech industries? Yes, it's usually the same throughout my whole career. But I will say my first gig did bring me in the 1990s. My first job where I got hired as an employee, it brought me from below poverty level, like really bad stuff, to six-figure income for my first year. That was wild to me, absolutely wild. And my life's been different ever since then. And I'll go into, actually, there is a few links on this slide I would like to show if possible. It just shows more about the why I do what I do, because today I like putting an audience in 3D and virtual reality environments where no one has to explain in English what they're looking at or experiencing. The people get to experience it and know that they're respected. Like no one's gonna, do anything crazy to them or disrespectful to them. So even while they're in spaces that are not English or Spanish or French, you don't need to know Onkwehonweneha to go into these experiences and enjoy yourself. And the enjoyment is if you don't know the language and culture and you're just looking at the visuals, what I've noticed is people that don't even have an interest in the culture here, they do actually get an interest in it because they're wondering what are they looking at, which has been interesting to see. These links on this slide will show you some of the videos, so you don't have to put on a VR device if you don't want to see what some of that is. There's also, if you ever visit the Akwesasne Indian Reservation, there is a cultural center where they have a couple of virtual reality experiences I created for them. And one puts you, that was many, many years ago, but it's still there. I built it for the Oculus Go, the first device they had. And it's Longhouse Vr, and that was so much fun to build. I got a guy with a drone, and the museum in Albany, they have this beautiful setup with a longhouse, all kinds of stuff. I got them to allow my guy with a drone to fly his drone through that whole thing in the museum. And we have 360 video of, oh my gosh, it's so hard to describe in English. You'd have to experience it. But I did that, and then I for that one, because my graphic design skills were not really like they are today, so I hired a graphic designer who actually recently got hired. She works on some AAA games now, and that's on my website. But anyways, I shared with her some baskets, pictures of baskets that are very significant to the culture here, sweetgrass baskets. And she built this 3D basket, a sweetgrass basket. And what I did is I made it so big in VR that you sit in this basket in the middle of the sky world, and the stars are the Pleiades, which is significant for that time of the year in January. The Pleiades are just above you, and it's just really peaceful and beautiful. And I think that's like a lot of the VR stuff that I build in the AR. There's a contrast. It goes from peaceful and calm to that really the hyper way that I process the world with techno and lots of dancing and just wild stuff. I just yeah, it's a stark contrast from each other. But that one, Longhouse Vr, is very peaceful. I think people should just see it, but it's because it is hard to describe in English. How do I produce XR? First, I do the best with whatever I have to work with. If documentation doesn't exist for us to learn really fast for prototyping or even a complete project, I experiment, I prototype, and I make my own documentation. And I enjoy that process because it's hard to say. You never know what the process is going to be sometimes. Sometimes it means me Velcro taping a bunch of different mobile devices onto a big giant board and running around a city and seeing how many IoT devices are out there that I can send data back and forth to. Other times it means I'm sitting in solitary confinement for a week or two and building something in Xcode. So it really does come down to like what I learned in our culture about just doing the best I can with what I have to work with. The other cool thing too is, you know, the amazing internet. I'm always in those places, Reddit, you know, all those places. And the one thing I do though that is a little bit where people are sometimes shocked, but those of us work in the tech industry, this won't shock you. I have profiles where I just look like a generic white teenage male. And I found that's the best way for me to keep the conversation on the technology, especially when I have questions about, you know, just even simple things like syntax or something, I don't know, or the SDKs. I found that's been sometimes, and I apologize in advance if this offends anyone, but I found sometimes that's the only way I can get through to do my work in a way that most non-natives get to benefit from, in that they can communicate, they can go on the internet and ask a question about C programming language and get a response, and it's respectful and it has nothing to do with, say, their gender, their race, or anything. Because I found when I ask these questions as me, with my English name or even with my artist name now, because more people are getting to see what I look like as MoniGarr. I found when I ask questions, as you see today, I found the conversation doesn't stay on, like, say, C programming language. It goes into these places that are where I don't feel safe. I'll say that. So that's how I do the work I do. And let's get back to tech. I don't like talking about the yucky stuff if I don't have to. So the next slide, Onkwehonwehneha. That is at the core of how I do everything today, especially. So every project I'm involved in right now has to do with Onkwehonwe revival and retention. One of the websites where you can see a lot of my current work, it's not always current actually, there's always something going on behind the scenes. I expect some big updates probably in the next 2 months to mohawklanguage.ca. That's where I tend to put my recent work in regards to VR and AR and 360, all that stuff. And right now, I'm actually working on an XR web series, and we have this 3D environment that I made using off-the-shelf stuff. So I did not have to do any software engineering or anything. The only thing I'm focused on is the actual content creation and the production, and also the distribution, actually. And for that, I'm mostly doing, so I have 3D characters that I designed that you could see on mohawklanguage.ca. And if you guys see my slides, you'll see some of them on there too. So I do the 3D character design, and I use DAZ Studio for that actually right now, although I'm getting more involved in Blender. I don't know how far I'll go with Blender though, because I don't have a goal to be known as an amazing graphic designer. My goal is going to get GitHub Revival and Retention. So I don't know, we'll see where that goes. I actually do face scans and photogrammetry to design these characters too. I do motion capture to animate them. And I'm using, right now, I'm just using an iPhone for the motion capture, but we have a suit coming in soon. Yeah, and I have like a small film studio in Akwesasne that we use for this type of work. And then spatial audio. I really like how Unity 3D, I can just drop the audio files into the 3D environment, because I love when people can move around an environment, and spatial audio, like they know that audio is coming from, say, a specific character or a specific object. I really like that part of VR. But then I'm also doing augmented reality posters, where the posters, when anyone points a standard mobile device, Android or iOS, they can get an idea of maybe a little piece of this story, and links to the VR, but also the web XR, because this is available on a web page, so that people don't have to go into a VR device or even a mobile to see the content and hear the language, because that's the goal for everything, is hear that language, revive and retain it in a way that's respectful and friendly, and also especially that our protocols are acknowledged and followed. That is really huge, and also challenging, like, because it requires highly technical people, like, that aren't used to dealing with, say, the business logic as much, but also with political issues. And it takes them having to acknowledge the stuff that they don't usually have to deal with, or having, in my case right now, in more recent months, I've had to deal with that stuff myself personally. And that's why I'm hoping that all these grant proposals I'm doing, that something comes through so that I can support a team of Indigenous engineers and developers and designers. So next slide, that's all about my XR web series I started talking about. These two characters on here, the one on the right with the red hair, I did actually do a 3D scan of my own face, and then use DAZ Studio, the default textures that they have. Like, if you've never used DAZ Studio, and you're interested in this kind of stuff, you should check it out. It's fast, easier. It's not totally easy if you're not used to that kind of interface, but it is a fast way to get content created, designed, and produced, ready for like a final production, and to animate it without being an expert graphic designer. It's been a very interesting process to me, because that's what I do. Whatever problem or issue I'm trying to solve, I'm not loyal to one way of doing it. What I do is, my process is, I start looking out there, and the internet's a big thing, but also talking with people off the internet about, it really depends on the situation, about their expectations, if things have gone bad for them, or why they don't like something, because then that helps me find solutions that maybe weren't thought of before, while still being able to integrate things that I know will work and that I'm accustomed to, and I've built a lot of great solutions for in the past. But DAZ is one of those things where it's very unexpected for me, but this is in my life now as a pretty stable solution for what I'm dealing with as far as XR web series production. Because that can get wicked expensive if you're not careful. Just the business side and the politics, holy cow. And then you're looking at the tech costs with time, learning curves, the licensing, all that stuff. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, definitely talk with me, ask me some questions. I love talking about that too. And the next slide, yeah, I put some links to where you can find me on the internet. My name is MoniGarr, and I've used that name since the 90s. So you can find me on every social media platform, the mainstream stuff, but even the obscure things that most people have never heard of, I'm usually on there. And I'm happy to talk tech with Indigenous people, especially when it's in regards to language revival. That is a priority for me right now because, how do I describe this? So my focus on my own community's language, dialect. We have 7 communities with 3 dialects, and actually more than 3 dialects. So, but what I'm getting at is there's a lot of people with low resource languages that are not getting any support. My focus is on my own language, but that does not mean I can't help someone that's dealing with another language family. I have a ton of experience developing, but also supporting low resource language projects, including the really, really painful stuff. And the reason why I'm mentioning it is I may be able to help people that are doing that work right now navigate some of that most painful stuff that you have to navigate with those kind of projects. I won't get into that. Could be like a whole day. That could be a whole day presentation, how to navigate that, because especially when it involves artificial intelligence, for me, I had to deal with a lot of non-native tech corporations that are huge with a lot of money, literally trying to destroy my work. And even me as a person, when they couldn't destroy my work. There's a lot of racism out there. That's the best way to describe it. And what I can say here that could be helpful is when you're working on those projects, if you find yourself dealing with that kind of stuff, or even where people hate technology and like it's a monster, always remember why you're doing it. Always remember like the strength and the healing in the language and the culture, and it will get you through that horrible stuff. And definitely collaborate with your local elders and fluent speakers. If they're showing anger or pain or anything, let them know it's valid. It's totally valid, and acknowledge it. It will help all of you. What I'm finding, it helps all of us get through that, those challenges that have been stopping us from being able to communicate with our own languages on any device anywhere. So we need to do that. There's no reason for us to allow, if we have the skills and resources to support our language or build the solutions that can do it, I don't see any reason for us not to do it. And yes, I do understand that some people will be very scared and angry about that, but it's because we haven't dealt with that part of the issue yet. So we gotta deal with that. Do I have any more slides? So now it's Q&A. Ask me anything. Yeah, I look forward to everyone's questions, comments. There's so much to talk about with tech, you guys. Really, ask me anything. Okay, Onagiwahe, Nyawagoa. See you guys later. Bye-bye.